What's up, everybody? I'm Scott,
And I'm Jason.
and you are listening to Liquid Carnage. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good.
Uh,
But I have to admit something. So last week we talked about sports betting, and obviously the executive producer was not uh,
thrilled.
enthralled
He was not
with
thrilled with
our topic. But just to show you, I made a couple bets this weekend, and my team, the Rams, screwed me on my two tickets.
that.
They
See,
had to
I
win by 4, and they won by 3. And I
see.
went, oh, God. I can see why people who lose like thousands of dollars off of 1 point or a missed field goal they got to just be killing themselves.
I learned last week that I'm to stay away from my teams that I root for when I bet
Yeah.
because I won 100,
You won $102?
$130 this weekend.
Wow.
By strategically playing games that I don't want to say were give me games, but games that I felt comfortable with the outcomes, and I stuck to mostly college, and I won some prop bets on the NFL, like would Kyler Murray score a touchdown besides passing, things like that. That wasn't the bet, but
Yeah.
bets like that.
Okay.
So it worked out well for me, but still, I was doing in our prep work for today's show. I was kind of looking at the betting lines for this weekend, so I can kind of start making some ideas to see how I could do with that, what I could do with that money, and I don't know, man. Like I got to figure out what to do with it because it's their money they gave me. I just won with it, so I can't cash it out. So it's like playing that online poker machine we talked about. So I got to figure out what games this weekend I want to put it on or spread them around to see if I can keep making it ride. But yeah, he
There you
wasn't
go.
thrilled with it, but I think he wasn't thrilled with it because he can't do it.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I mean, I think also anytime that there's a topic that doesn't,
interesting.
spark his interest because he says he's not a gambler, so it's boring.
Yeah, well, neither am I, but still, it's fun to sit and look, and it's like fantasy football. It gives you another avenue of reason to watch different games.
Yep, I'm with you.
And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. It's nice that the football season is in full swing, both college and professional. I do again want to thank you for the Kyler Murray for Alvin Kamara trade. I know it hasn't paid off for you yet, but I do want to tell you when Michael Thomas comes back, I think you're going to be sitting just fine.
No, I did some preemptive crying and babbling, but I realized that you're not going to let a player, like coach is not going to let a player go that long.
Yeah.
Before they say you get him the ball. I don't care what you guys are doing. You need to get him the ball.
Yeah.
And so it all in good time. And frankly, my team's not as horrible as I thought it was going to be. So.
Yeah, it's a long season, my friend. So
Yes.
We will see what happens. But in the meantime, while we're not watching football, I've been trying to diversify. I know you've been trying to read books as much as you can, and
Yep.
in all my free time, which there isn't a lot. So I'm trying to watch more documentaries.
Good.
I'm trying to broaden my horizons, if you will, more beyond the serial killer stuff or supernatural stuff you see on Discovery Plus.
Okay. Good.
I'm just trying to find some stuff that I think would be fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I came across one that I didn't think I'd be that into, but once I started watching it, I realized how much it really resonated with me because it was so much of my childhood too. It was the ZZ Top documentary on Netflix,
Oh, okay.
and it was telling of how the trio became a trio and how they became a band and just their rise to infamy in the music industry. And it was such a cool story because my dad is a huge ZZ Top fan, and we just lost Dusty Hill, the bassist from from the band. So it all kind of worked, and I was telling my dad about it because I thought he'd like it, and I think he would like it. But it's just this cool story about how these three random guys from Texas just started gigging in the late 60s and ended up traveling to Houston for the same reasons, found each other, and did it the old school way as far as touring and becoming famous as you could. And that was back before they had the beards. Because I don't know if ZZ Top's notorious for the two beards, and the drummer never had a beard, but his last name was Beard.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I was gonna say no. He had a beard, but no, his last name was a beard.
His
That's right.
last name was Beard, Frank
Yeah.
Beard. Yeah, and it was just crazy to sit there and watch because they had a manager who their manager was a one-hit wonder from back in the early '60s, and he learned how to be a manager from Colonel Tom Parker, who was Elvis's manager back in the day. So he kept him off like the Ed Sullivan Show and kept him off, nationwide radio, and wanted them just to tour, 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 and tour. And that's all they did for like 10 years. And they finally hit like the Memphis Blues Festival, and everyone, when they went on, it was like the end of the show, and everyone that was famous back to like Muddy Waters stayed to listen to them and just was enthralled. And everyone thought they were black at first because
Wow.
the way they played and the way they sang. And then, that's kind of where they started catching notoriety in Memphis, and becoming more of a regional band. And then world famous, they opened for the Stones in Hawaii. And, they really caught some notoriety there in the 70s. And then they took a break. And just what they did during that break really just intrigued me. Like Frank Beard, the drummer, went to rehab, got out of the drugs. Dusty Hill, the bassist, went and got a job as a luggage thrower onto airplanes at the Houston airport. He just wanted a regular job.
Yeah.
And then Billy Gibbons, the lead singer, he took off to Europe and got really into punk rock.
Really?
Really got into the Clash, really got into that whole scene. And like they were going to take a 6 month break that lasted 3 years. And they came back together in the early 80s. And Billy and Dusty ended up with beards, unintentionally, but they ended up with the beards. And
Okay.
they made the Eliminator album, which is their
Yes.
most famous album, the one that put
Yep.
them on the map.
Yep.
And it turns out, like, if you go back and you watch every video from that album, they're telling a story. You just have to figure out what that story is, and they kind of walk you through that. And it was just kind of cool to see like how they were able to change their sound but still maintain their sound. And they became the longest tenured original band in music history, which is being the three of
Wow.
them. Yeah, before Billy
Wow.
died. Yeah, so it's crazy.
And how did you pick that when you just were kind of working on Netflix and saw it?
Yeah, that's really what it was. It's
Wow.
home on Labor Day. Looked at it and I flagged it, and just finally had a chance to sit down and watch it. While I've been in the gym and whatnot. He's thinking like, damn, this is cool, and it made me go back and like listen to some of their earlier stuff on Amazon Music, and you realize like how good like even they were back then, just with the blues and just jamming. And it makes you wish that we had more music like that today, not all the synthesized shit that we get on regular radio.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's almost like a throwback to a different time, a different era of music where, you could have two guitarists and a drummer and
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they can make magic, and that's what those guys did. So I recommend it if you have like the time, because they speak in the documentary interviews, and they talk about some of the crazy shit they did, and it's just fun. Like it's cool. So I'm looking for my next big documentary to really sink my teeth into. I haven't really found one yet because I haven't had the time, but that one caught my eye. And I know you've been talking a lot about the books you've been reading and trying to better your education. And for me, music is just amazing and a big piece of my life. And just learning about the history of them, I thought was uh, a necessary piece just to kind of fill in the backstory of my relationship with my dad and whatnot.
Well, a few weeks ago, remember we talked about Slash, and
Mm-hmm.
I would never have thought about reading the book about Slash.
Yeah,
And when I did, I was eye opened to things that I had no idea. And I don't know about you, but what are your thoughts when you look at that a band like ZZ Top, and you watch the documentary, realize they're regular people just like us. They have fears and goals and did all these things. That was what I was most interested with Slash is, wow, this guy, I mean, he sounds like a jacked up person, but he's a person. He's not just Slash the guitarist. He's a person, who has
yeah.
things, demons that he has to deal with. And did you find that with ZZ Top, that knowing more about their back history, other than just the music was really interesting?
Yeah, actually, I did, and I thought that was kind of the cool part for me. It was like learning about all that stuff and kind of seeing like the demons Frank Beard, their drummer, went through with his drug addictions, and just the drive Dusty had just to be a regular dude. Like he thought, gigging was cool and whatnot, but at a certain point, you get tired of going to the same. You go to the shows and you're back in the tour bus or whatever, and rinse and repeat for 10 years nonstop. It
Yeah,
drains you.
yeah,
So it's kind of nice to see that they are regular people, and just to hear some of the funny stories. They talked about playing a hall somewhere in the south deep Texas, and only one guy showed up,
what?
and that guy stayed for the whole show. It was just him. Nobody else showed. And so they said they bought him a Coke and they bullshitted with him. And they never asked his name, but they said that guy would come around for the next 40 years to their shows. And they still don't know his name, never knew his name, but he'd just say, "Hey, remember me?" And they said, "Yeah, man." And he just, they'd hang out for the night and just go from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
And
crazy stories. So you're right.
did ZZ Top do it for the fame, or did they do it just because they loved the music and the fame was kind of an ancillary benefit of it?
I think that was more to do with it. I think, you do it because you love doing it. And they're the legitimate case that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah,
And to hear how they did it and the way they did it, and it was their terms. And I think that's what I took out of that more than anything else, is that they didn't change for anybody. This was what you see is what you get, and you're not going to box us in to be anything that we're not or we don't want to be. So if we want to change our sound, we're gonna, and you're gonna let us. Or if we want to blend it with this sound and experiment, we're going to, and we're going to make it work. And clearly they did.
that's awesome. Yeah,
So
I'll
it's
have to
it
look that was on Netflix, right?
was on Netflix. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a cool one.
Yeah, I find that sometimes the documentaries and the like the biographies of
Hmm.
famous people are more even fascinating than some of the movies that are coming out that are fictional, because sometimes some of these stories are more fascinating than you could make them up.
Yeah, yeah,
And it sounds like that is one of those stories that if you just listen to the story, it's like, holy crap, that there's a lot of things that you just learn and didn't know.
yeah. It's just neat. And like I said, my dad's always been a huge ZZ Top fan, so the EP and I grew up a lot hearing their albums, um, like when our dad was driving us around or hunting or whatever else. And it's just kind of cool just to kind of tie it all together, and it makes you go full circle to appreciate that band on a whole different level. So they've once again found their way into my playlist, but it's more of their older stuff because um, Tres Hombres, one of their first albums, is a great blues album if you're just hanging out in the kitchen cooking. It's
Okay.
totally worth it. I mean, that's just, and then you realize once you start listening, like, oh man, I've heard people cover this song or riffs from this song through these different bands. It's just cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I obviously I read, but I do watch some TV too. I like TV, and I actually stumbled on it was called The Search for Mozart, and
Hmm.
basically it was the autobiography of Mozart, but it was more than the autobiography of just Mozart or the biography of Mozart. It was also um, famous musicians and people in the classical music industry looking at not only his life but at the stages of life when he wrote certain pieces, and they would break down what was so special about those pieces over just music in and of itself or his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I mean, I guess he wrote his first compositional piece at like 4, and they said that at the time what he did at age 4 was so different than what even contemporary composers were doing, that you could instantly see that this man had a gift. If you want to say from God, you can, a gift of something that was just greater than even the contemporaries of his time.
Do you remember what you're
And
doing at 4 years old?
no,
Yeah.
no,
Oh,
no. And to see, I mean, and the way that they told the story is, so they're talking about him, and how his father basically saw that his skills, you could take this little 4-year-old out on the road, and he was
Uh-huh.
doing little concerts all over with this 4-year-old, and then it became a 7-year-old, and then as he got older, the concerts became more and more lucrative for the family. And but it was just amazing to me that you look at this 4-year-old kid doing things that not even adults can do, and it got me thinking, there are people out there that are these geniuses
Mm-hmm.
that transcend what we normal people live in. Like, we live in a time, and they are able to transcend out of that time and do things that no one else even had contemplated before.
Right. And it's crazy that it happens like that,
Well, and I'm wondering, who in our time are those geniuses? Who are those people that when you look at them and you say, wow, okay, this person has transcended, took us from this place and elevated us to something so much greater, so much beyond what we had possibly could have imagined.
I think when you talk about that from a modern standpoint, you're looking at people that have taken us from a technology piece
Mm-hmm.
and pushed us forward.
Okay.
And it's safe to it's cliche to say it, but you look at Bill Gates, what he did with Microsoft and what that did, what the computers did over the last 25 years with his OS. Steve Jobs, uh, Jeff Bezos, for that fact, what he did with Amazon, just taking an online bookstore and making it the empire that it is today. I think
Okay.
how much they changed the way we work as a world. You look at what Mozart did. Mozart changed the world by his music, and that's one of the only ways he could change it back in his time. But it was
Well,
a
and
different time.
they tried to say that they equate, like, when you're talking about these geniuses, I'm saying geniuses, and even that is a definition that I think I don't even know what the right definition is, because they equate geniuses like Mozart, Shakespeare,
Yeah,
Einstein, who basically took the parameters of what we live in and expanded it to a point that I don't think we could even fathom could have gone there. But when you look back, those men, as they were identified in this documentary, changed the way that we looked at music, at writing, at science.
yeah. No, I agree
Um,
with that. So
and
they
so,
did shape the world.
yeah, like, so for example, does Zuckerberg and Larry Page and Sergey Brin, do they fit into the realm of changing the way we look at the world because of Google or Facebook and Google?
I think even if you don't want to include them, I think you kind of have to, just based on the fact that they're now into our, their apps and websites are now into the basic lexicon of our society in every language. You don't know
Yeah,
the answer to a question, just Google it.
yeah,
And, oh, did you see that on Facebook? I mean,
yeah.
it's part of our lexicon now. So I think that you have to give credence to it, whether you want to or not.
How about Elon Musk?
I don't know yet. Yeah, he's got a motor company that makes electric cars, and he's got a great solar company, and he's trying to put people in space recreationally. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's done anything that's really pushed us forward yet. He might be a trailblazer, but I don't know if he's on that level. You know?
Yeah, and that was the tough part for me, because, like, I look at Steve Jobs, okay,
Uh huh.
and Steve Jobs, I even equate Steve Jobs differently than I do Bill Gates, because while Bill Gates did create an operating system, there's a lot of people that could have created an operating system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that he did something that no one else was doing at the time? There were operating systems that were already out there when Bill Gates wrote his operating system. Um, you know, Steve Jobs wrote an operating system that's just as powerful. So does a genius be diminished because more than one person does the same thing but a little differently?
Well, no, because now you're talking about Beethoven versus Mozart.
Well, they grew up at different times. That's the difference.
Well, but they still, I guess, given the times, that's kind of inconsequential because they're in the same field. I mean,
Right. And
they're both classic classic composers. So I
Right.
don't think it's that different from comparing Jobs to Gates.
Right. And so maybe the definition of genius is the hard part, because like I'm trying to think in musicians in a musical sense, who are the people in music that have transformed us in the last 50 years?
Oh, musically, that's
Yeah. Like I mean
Quincy
that
Jones.
those what's that?
Quincy Jones,
Maybe I don't know.
Dr. Dre. I don't know. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I
Taylor
can't
Swift. I mean Taylor Swift, she changed
possibly,
us, she changed us.
possibly. I mean,
Michael Jackson maybe? I don't know.
trailblazers in that field. I know Freddie Mercury's probably very underrated for the amount of songwriting and composition that he did.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
people don't realize how much he actually was involved with the writing and the arrangements for the Queen songs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
You
mean,
know?
and then some, I'm sure the older people say, well, Elvis Presley changed everything. Would there
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
Michael Jackson without an Elvis Presley? Would there be, I don't know. I have no idea. But it got me thinking that I love stories that get me thinking. And when I'm looking at Mozart, it's like I'm looking at this story being told about this young man at 10 years old doing things that adults couldn't do.
Right.
Adults can't do that. Like I don't know if it carries over to sports, but will we ever have another golfer like Tiger Woods?
Oh, I think so. I think as sports progress, there's always going to be that generational athlete. I don't know if I don't know if they'll ever be on point as the ones previously. Michael Jordan is a completely different animal versus LeBron James. It doesn't take away LeBron James's accolades, but he's not Michael Jordan. He's not Kobe Bryant. Makes
Well,
sense.
and some might argue that if it wasn't for Michael Jordan, would LeBron James be LeBron James?
That's a fair assessment too. I mean, Michael Jordan's really kind of the one who started putting the NBA on the map. Um, Up until the mid '70s, most of the NBA wasn't even shown live. It was tape delayed and after the nightly news. So it wasn't until he started making those highlight reel dunks back in the '80s where they started putting it on prime time and weekend the wide world of sports.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so if I'm trying to think musically, who would be someone that we could say transformed or changed the way that music was moving in a direction, and then in the last 50 years, this person changed, was so far ahead of anyone else that was out there that music kind of went with that person. I can't think of anyone like that. But yeah, documentaries are pretty cool. I love documentaries. I don't know why. Like I said earlier, I think I like true stories more than I like fictional stories.
Yeah,
I love those.
I tend to agree on the same thing. I think it's sometimes the true stories are the harder ones to believe because uh, you can't possibly you think that couldn't possibly happen to somebody, and the rise to fame the way it did, or the tragedies that happened. But it's nothing is impossible.
Well, and one of the shows that I love to watch on YouTube actually is PBS Frontline, which is
Uh-huh.
like it's an hour long, I guess, a documentary. It's a news story. It takes a subject and it basically dives in through correspondence into something that happened.
Uh-huh.
And recently I watched one that basically, with 9/11, the 20th anniversary of 9/11 that just happened, they did a re-release of one that was called United States of Secrets.
Uh-huh.
And basically it highlighted the development and continuation of the NSA's program, which uses our communications, texts, emails, phone calls, and basically collects all that data to monitor whether or not people are doing bad things. And throughout the whole time, it's diving into how little privacy we really have.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I mean? Like
that's the
we
Patriot
think
Act
we
for
have
you.
all these freedoms, and yet right now, this particular conversation that's being recorded is being recorded and watched by a government agency.
I kind of feel bad for that guy. The guy that gets stuck with a liquid carnage feed.
Yeah, like I would wonder if we started talking about terrorism or blowing up again and again and again. I wonder if we get visitors from the FBI.
I would prefer not to find that out.
Right, exactly. But the point
And,
is
I'm
that
glad you're the one that said that, not me.
right. But the point is that we talk about our freedoms, and no one's going to tell me what I can or can't do, and yet unconsciously we are just in the vein of we got to protect ourselves from a danger. We just give our freedoms and our privacy away to people.
Yeah, I think
And
the
and that documentary just, I mean, it was an hour and a half long documentary talking about just the development of the program. Frontline does a great job. If you ever want to watch a good news documentary, look up YouTube and look up PBS Frontline. They're amazing.
I'll have to consider looking at that. I'll be honest. When I get on YouTube, and this drives Janice nuts, I watch Meat Church videos.
I don't know what that is.
Meat Church is a barbecue company out of Texas that does instructional
Oh,
videos.
yeah, I remember that. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, last night we watched a clip on how to make smoked bacon wrapped onion rings. So, very different education on a very different level.
Yeah. Well,
But
hey,
still,
wait, whatever works. And the greatest part about this documentary is two parts. So the first part we're talking about, the National Security Administration or agency looking at our, emails and stuff and trying to protect us by monitoring every single United States citizen's emails, phone calls. Okay.
uh
And everyone's like, oh, tisk tisk, Big Brother's watching me. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But then the next half of the documentary talks about how Facebook and Google do the exact same thing. The only difference is they just sell that to marketing people to sell their products to us. But they're
yep,
doing the exact same thing. And we just give them these rights. We give them these accesses by here, we'll tell you all of our interests, and let you use your algorithm to find out what we're thinking and how we're thinking. And it just got me thinking. It just got me thinking. We are not a free society. We live
no,
within very controlled um, regimes, and we think we're free, but we're not. We're not.
it is an illusion. I will go with that. It is an
Yeah.
illusion, and I think that's what most people have a hard time understanding or wanting to realize right now. That everything that they want to fight for, quote unquote, is an illusion. But if it helps people sleep better at night, that they're fighting the good fight and in their mind and whatever else, more power to them. As long as they're good to each other, they leave most of the people alone. I don't really care.
Well, and let's be honest. I think most of the people, most of us, feel very safe. I mean, I think most of us feel very safe. One, we're not doing anything to get in trouble with the police or with law enforcement. And two, if we can catch a bad guy from doing a bad thing, all the better.
Yeah, I mean, there is a price to that, but the results you can't argue with. So you kind of have to balance it out.
Right.
You know.
But yeah, so I love documentaries. I watch them. I love reading books. I'm glad that you're starting to watch some documentaries because frankly, I don't need another Fast and Furious 10 saga of people racing cars.
Oh man,
Let's
it's
elevate ourselves a little bit. Let's elevate
it's
ourselves.
it's so much more than just racing cars, man. They're super spies now. You got to know
Hey, and
that.
also, I guess the one guy went into outer space on the last one, so that means that the
They
final episode, they're going to drive on Mars and
Oh
do
no,
spin outs on
hey
Mars. Is
man,
that what the next thing is?
they took a Fiero into space. No
Yeah.
spoilers, but that movie was so outlandish. Jocelyn, Janice's oldest, looked at me and said, "How did this get from a movie about street racing and drugs to this?" And
This
and
uneducated
I
society who needs just numbness. Just numb
yeah,
me,
it's kind of what
please.
it was like. Well, it was all fun and dandy until they introduced The Rock and they were doing a heist in Brazil.
Yeah,
And
I know.
next thing you know, they're super spies. I really couldn't tell you where it all blurs and goes into that. But hey, you know what? Some people just want their brain to go to mush. They can watch stuff like that.
I know. I'm with you.
All right, man. So as we wrap up, if you have a documentary you want us to check out, hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, all at Liquid Carnage. If you have any recommendations for our EP, Tom, he likes the boring stuff, hit him up on Twitter and Instagram at liquid_EP.
Well, hey, I hope you enjoy some more documentaries. I know I do, and maybe we'll do another episode sometime in the future. But thanks for listening, everybody. We really appreciate you. That was Scott. I am Jason, and as always, if you never know quite what to say, just have yourself some liquid courage.